All right, good morning and welcome everyone to the seventh and final day of the Tell It Slant Poetry Festival. It's bittersweet to be here, but I'm really excited for this morning. I think you're all in for a treat. I'm Anna Plummer, Program Coordinator at the Emily Dickinson Museum, and you're joining us now for the panel Home in a Time of Crisis, New Poets from Poetry Wales. And I hope you will go ahead and let us know where you're joining in from in the chat. And we encourage your participation and affirmations here throughout the program. And we'll be together for about 90 minutes. I'm going to begin with a visual ID. I'm a white woman with medium length brown hair, and I'm wearing a dark blue V-neck with a knit tan blazer. And in my background is the restored 19th century bedroom of Emily Dickinson in the Dickinson homestead, where I am joining you from today. And it's a sunlit room with wallpaper with pink roses and 19th century furniture, including a sleigh style bed and a stove. And because of our topic today, I'm going to share a little bit more with you about the homestead, which is a federal style home in the prominent location along Main Street in Amherst, Massachusetts. And it was constructed in 1813 as the home of Dickinson's grandparents. And the poet lived here from birth until the age of 10 and then moved back in the mid 19th century until her death at the age of 55. And it's where she wrote the vast majority of her nearly 1,800 poems. She wrote at the time of moving that she was out with lanterns looking for herself, but would also say that home is a holy thing. Nothing of doubt or distrust can enter its blessed portals. So with that, I'm really excited to turn it over to our wonderful poets who are here today. They're going to be reading from poems which are going to be shared on your screen. And you can also head to their event webpage, which I will link in the chat as soon as I have the opportunity to do so. So the poems will be available on their webpage as well as shared. And now I'm going to introduce to you the wonderful Zoë Brigley, who's with us here today and will be facilitating this program. Zoë Brigley is a Welsh American poet, essayist, editor, and curator whose work spans poetry, translation, nonfiction, and interdisciplinary art. Her three full-length poetry collections, Hand and Skull, Conquest, and The Secret, published by Blood Axe, have all been named UK Poetry Book Society recommendations. And she is the winner of numerous impressive awards. And in 2025, she was awarded an individual artist grant from the Arts Council of Ohio and an artist's project grant from the Greater Columbus Arts Council. And Zoë is the editor of Poetry Wales, which I will link you to shortly as well. Zoë, please introduce our poets today.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for that lovely introduction. I'll just take a moment for accessibility purposes to self-describe. So I'm a white woman with longish fair hair. I'm wearing a sleeveless magenta top, and behind me, I'm here, my house in Ohio. I've got a plant and a picture frame full of like family photos. Um, I actually only live here part of the time. Part of the time I live in Ohio and part of the time I spend in Wales. So I'm moving back and forth, and that has quite a particular slant on home for me. But I want to welcome you to this event, which is on home in a time of crisis. Poetry Wales has been at the heart of Welsh and international poetry since 1965, and this year is very special for us because it's its 60th anniversary. And in that time, we've been publishing some of the most distinctive voices in Welsh and international poetry. Alongside championing poets from Wales and across the world, we're deeply committed to fostering and training the next generation of editors. And so it's a real pleasure to be working today with three of them here: Kandace Siobhan Walker, Tangie Mitchell, and Zakia Carpenter-Hall. We're also thinking today, of course, about Emily Dickinson, whose life and poetry constantly negotiated the meaning of home. And while home was often a place of comfort, it was not always a place of complete sanctuary for her. Anna gave you a little quotation there about home being holy and pointed out to me the source of that, which was a letter that Dickinson wrote to her brother Austin on October the 25th, 1851, while he was away from home. And I want to read you the whole quotation because it's a really beautiful definition of home. She reflects. Our fire burned so cheerfully, I couldn't help thinking of how many were here and how many were away. And I wished so many times during that long evening that the door would open and you come walking in. Home is a holy thing. Nothing of doubt or distrust can enter its blessed portals. I feel it more and more as the great world goes on, and one and another forsake in whom you place your trust. Here seems indeed to be a bit of Eden, which not the sin of any can utterly destroy. Smaller it is indeed. So, what a wonderful sense we get there of what is good about feeling at home, how it resounds so much in those words. And as Sung Ho Lee has observed, there is a striking tension between Dickinson's vibrant inner world and the physical houses that she inhabited. More recently, Skoczewski and Salenza have argued that for Dickinson, true comfort and resilience were found less in bricks and mortar than in the life of the mind and poetry itself. All this puts me in mind of a marvellous scene in Terence Davies's biopic of Dickinson, A Quiet Passion, which captures this ambivalence. On a dark winter evening, the camera pans in slow 360-degree circle around the family's room. Each member is absorbed in solitary work, reading, knitting, needlework, until we return to Dickinson herself, surveying it all. Without access to her inner thoughts, we are left to wonder, is this a sanctum or claustrophobic, a refuge or a prison, or could it be both? Together, I think these perspectives remind us of how the idea of home, both fragile and resilient, was central to Dickinson's imagination and remains vital to ours today. Kandace, Tangie, and Zakia are all going to explore notions of home and resistance today in an event that we hope will be uplifting, but also recognizing overwhelming difficulty with being at home right now. So I'm going to introduce them and they're going to explore this in greater detail. So first of all, Kandace Siobhan Walker is a writer and artist, author of two books of poetry, Kaleido and Cowboy. Cowboy was shortlisted for the Forward Prize Best Verse Collection 2023 and won Wales Book of the Year. Her work has appeared in Poetry Review, Magma, and Bad Lilies, among other publications. Second, born and raised in North Carolina, Tangie Mitchell's work centers personal and collective histories of the Black American South, among other subjects. Tangie earned a bachelor's in political science from Spelman College and an MFA in writing from Sarah Lawrence. A Watering Hole Poetry Fellow and an alumni of the UK-based Obsidian Foundation. Her work has featured in Obsidian, West Trade Review, and Berlin Lit. Finally, Zakia Carpenter-Hall is an American writer, tutor, editor, and critic living in the UK. She was winner of Poetry London's inaugural mentoring scheme, a London Library Emerging Writer, and a Jerwood bursary recipient. Into the Same Sound Twice, her debut pamphlet, was actually published, I'm glad to say, by the book publishing arm of Poetry Wales Press, Seren Books, Seren meaning star in the Welsh language. She was part of the editorial team of Magma Poetry 82 as well as Obsidian. They've all been guest editors for Poetry Wales. Tangie worked on an issue on the theme of home in a time of ecological crisis, and Kandace and Zakia worked on an issue featuring innovative poetry. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Kandace to begin our discussion about home and resilience.
Thank you so much, Zoe, and thank you, Anna. And thank you all for being here. I'm Kandace Siobhan Walker. I'll start with a self-description. I have brown skin, dark brown eyes, and shoulder-length curly black hair. I'm wearing a white t-shirt and blue dungarees, and I'm sitting in front of a glass window and a white wall that's out of focus. I'll be reading I Had Been Hungry All the Years by Emily Dickinson and three of my own poems. But before I do, I wanted to ask this question for you to consider throughout my reading. When have you felt that you didn't belong and what kept you at the window? If you were able to find a way in, what helped you to do so? And I'll also place this question in the chat. I had been hungry all the years. My noon had come to dine. I trembling drew the table near and touched the curious wine. 'Twas this on tables I had seen, when turning hungry home, I looked in windows for the wealth I could not hope for mine. I did not know the ample bread, 'twas so unlike the crumb the birds and I had often shared in nature's dining room. The plenty hurt me, 'twas so new, myself felt ill and odd, as berry of a mountain bush transplanted to a road. Nor was I hungry, so I found that hunger was a way of persons outside windows, the entering takes away. And could I have the next page in my screen share? Thank you. So I'm going to read three of my own poems. This one is in memory of Elijah McClain, an African-American man who was murdered by the police. He was autistic. I am also autistic, and this poem is speaking to the ways that certain neurological conditions and certain disabilities can make being at home in the world, just anywhere, quite fraught proposition. This poem's called Awareness of Position and Movement. Blue morning buries headlights. Heading home? 3 bodies birthed suddenly by the fist of the world. I circumnavigate with music, dampened senses, slow motion, explosive debris. Heading home, are we? Humming in my chest. Realize questions in 3 police vests means stop, means move slowly, carefully, means good night. Excuse me, I'm talking to you. Requirement to speak. Silence belongs in the earth. I wish I had had a great love. I wish I had developed a deeper dream of love. Swimming through the world of sense, butterfly strokes through ocean trash, back to the world of body, of speech. Where are you coming from? My lips, my tongue, my vocal tract are in the world of bodies, of violences. But I am wherever I am when I am at the mercy of the world of perception. Now I am in handcuffs. Now I am in a van. Now I am menstruating in a cell. Now I am on the alley behind my flat while, during this detainment, the sun has risen like a burning violin. This next poem is part of a series looking at the history of autism spectrum condition or autism spectrum disorder. And I've been researching some of the early studies into autistic children. Donald T., who died, I think, last year, was one of the first people formally diagnosed with autism. And this poem is borrowing from some of the interviews with him in Leo Kanner's initial studies. Goldfish Psalm. Chrysanthemum is your trumpet vine. You shall now say, all right. Walk under the gaze of your dahlia, 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 to lie down in green pastures as literal and inflexible as the right one leading the left. Water glass restores your 12-12, pronominal reversals through the dark clouds shining. Annette and Cecile make purple. I could put a little comma or semicolon. Want a bath? Letters with his fingers in the air. They are a poet. Sadly, doctors don't treat that. Spit water in the milk glass, clear eyes. You live within yourself. There in your pocket, verbal rituals for comfort. Now say what you say to me. Colors in perfect order. What other love? How many hours in a minute? How many days in an hour? Answer. All the days of your life. This will be the right way, because it's the way I showed you how. And this is my last poem. It's from that same series. It's called St. Candace 3. wishing for someone to carry me through this darkness in the robust and muscular arms of belonging. I fell asleep in the taxi on the way home last night, asking in my dream why love wasn't in my cards. In groups, I fall behind, tell a lie to catch up. Kicking the seat in front left me by the riverside at 3:46. Am I awake? The taxi driver warned me not to sleep. You never know who these people are. You never know who I will be. Hitchhiker in the rain on a winding country road. Again with the stars. Again with the talking to trees. Drunk crying, leaning against the railing of every bridge in the world, too lonely to pay my debts. Strangers, lovers, threat or rescue. I want to know who you are. I want you to know who I am. The relief of climbing into a stranger's truck when you belong far away. Such wonder still ahead. Take me home. Oh, take me home. Thank you.
Great. Can I just come in a second and ask you something, Candace, which is
Mhm.
why did you decide on that particular Emily Dickinson poem, do you think?
Um, I think that one really resonated with me because of the way the poem is mostly outside of an idea of home or a sense of home. And I think for me, there has often been a kind of searching for home and not quite feeling like one can access it, having an idea of it, or even like a concrete place and feeling still in some way outside of it, whether that's with family or in a specific place that you come from in a way that's part of one's heritage, but still feeling kind of like you're in a third space or between two or multiple places that doesn't allow you to fully be a part of something.
Wonderful answer. And I was going to say to people that I also want to repeat for you Candace's question, which was about when have you felt that you didn't belong and what kept you at the window? What beautiful way of putting it, by the way. And then if you were able to find a way in, what helped you to do so? I love the question. If anyone's got any thoughts and they want to respond to that, please let us know in the chat. Um, but do you think that this question is speaking to your poetics a bit as well, that sense of exploring belonging and not belonging? And I love the way you put it, of being at the window and but do you think that your poetry is seeking to find a home, or is it just kind of sitting with the ambiguity of it, a bit like Dickinson in a way?
I think a bit of both. I think kind of looking for home and finding a home in that ambiguity, that realizing that when you're between spaces and not quite belonging so completely to anywhere, that maybe that is your space, that's your home. So I think often I write a poem hoping to reconcile something, but I end up making peace not with the thing I wanted, but with just where I actually am.
Mhm. And you grew up part of your life in Wales, but you've got lots of connections to other places as well. And do you think that's part of what gives you that sort of interesting perspective on things?
I think so. I think everyone has like intricacies in their heritage and their own like lived experience that make it somewhat problematic to feel fully like 100% of a place or a time. For me, my dad's African American and my mum's Jamaican Canadian, and I've grown up mostly in the UK and Wales. So I definitely identify with like partially with like being of kind of multiple generations. Like in Canada, I was second generation. In the UK, I'm not technically first, but then kind of the third or fourth generation to have moved away from where my family has spent most of their time the last few hundred years. So I definitely identify with kind of like theories around third culture, kids and things like that. But I don't think that it gives me a particularly unique perspective. Whenever I talk to people, there are so many kind of threads that everyone has in their own personal history.
I love that. Yeah, that's wonderful. And are you living in London right now?
Yeah. So I'm in London. I'm from one of those kind of areas in the countryside where there's just a complete dearth of people between the ages of 18 to like 35.
Right.
And if you move back home, you are working in like retail or like service, like a cafe. So I kind of was caught in that pipeline. But I go home quite often. It's yeah, definitely a big kind of feature in my life.
Great. Wonderful. And let's see what people have been saying in the comments.
Yeah, we have some wonderful comments here. In response to your question, most of the time I spent nomadically away from home a decade, knowing that there were two choices, adventure or roots. My feet at the time were hungrier than my heart. Numerous times, often depending so much on the welcomingness of the group. Often the best solution has been to step away and focus on the few high welcome groups I have found which feel like a warm hug. It's a very poetic response.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah, I love those. Yeah, and I agree, knowing about the natural world around me is one way I find my way into a place as a home. Yeah, definitely learning the names of things, even just where I live in London, learning the names of the trees I see in people's gardens or in the park helps me to feel very connected to a place.
I'll read another response here, which says lots of border spaces for me, blue collar upbringing versus academic, mother but not stepmother, etc. In some cases, I found a way in, others I'm traversing, being okay with the window.
Mhm.
Sounds like we have some poets in the audience.
Yeah, there's a nice comment from Diana a little further up as well. Saying growing up in a rural place, as I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that, a Hale white girl. I was at the window in local spaces. I feel incredibly thankful for that though, because my default is to listen to others first. I don't automatically think I should be centered.
Yeah, is that rural Hawaii, perhaps? Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. Mhm. Yeah, I think definitely when one is in a multicultural space that you kind of learn very quickly when conversations are not necessarily about your experience, but not that they don't have value for you to be able to listen. Um, Howley. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Diana. Thank you. Shall I hand back over to you guys?
Great. Yeah, we're probably going to go straight on to Tangie and find out what Tangie's question about home is.
Of course. Hi. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. And already, thank you so much, Candace, for your poems and for the conversation. So my question uh, actually is kind of connected and will make more sense maybe once we talk through the poem, the Dickinson poem that we're going to read. But it's what doors or windows, in parentheses, nuances, possibilities, tensions, does poetry hold open that other genres do not? Is poetry, the reading or writing of it, a mechanism of homemaking for you? And if so, how? I can also send that in the chat here. And yeah, we're gonna get into I Dwell in Possibility and see what Dickinson maybe has to say about that question. So I dwell in possibility. I dwell in possibility, a fairer house than prose, more numerous of windows, superior for doors, of chambers as the cedars, impregnable of eye, and for an everlasting roof, the gambrels of the sky. Of visitors, the fairest, for occupation, this, the spreading wide my narrow hands to gather paradise. Um, so for me, this poem, the reason why I picked it sort of feels a bit like an Ars Poetica, right? A bit of Dickinson sort of clarifying the role of the poet, but not in a didactic sense, right? She's not clarifying for anybody, trying to tell us what a poet should be and should do. It's for her. She's saying, right, this is this is my occupation, this is what I do, and this is why I do it. I was particularly intrigued by the use of the word dwell, right? And the home and the house, a physical house being the sort of metaphor through which Dickinson's exploring that role, right, for herself. Um, and there are tensions here, right? You have um this house that has a number of windows, a number of doors, right? But of the rooms, they're impregnable of the eye. There's a sense of self-solitude, right? A way that one can steal away and be with the self, maybe more ideally, more potently in poetry than anywhere else. But then you have that last stanza where, you have these visitors, right? So there's this privacy that poetry allows, but also this manner in which you can it invites others in a very particular way. So there's a tension there. Also, the penultimate line, right? So she is making clear the occupation, the spreading wide my narrow hands. And that tension between the need to spread wide, but sort of not being fully equipped, right, for the task that poetry allows. And there's this idea of reaching. Um, so there's this idea of having to go beyond and expand the self, right, in order to do the occupation correctly, or to do it justice, right? And there's something about that that's very hopeful for me. I do feel as a poet, I'm constantly a bit deep in deeper water than I feel comfortable in. And it seems that that is exactly where you need to be, right? According to Dickinson, just for the self, right? Um, so also kind of the last thing about this poem for me is we're doing all this expansion, we're doing all this pulling of the self in order to gather paradise. And that's such a specific word. And thinking of some of Dickinson's poetry for me, um, I mean, this is not the type of paradise that I imagine, right? This is not, so what does paradise mean? Is paradise self-articulation? Is paradise um that self-clarification that you receive at the end of the poem? What does it mean to have gathered paradise? What does it mean to have reached that? Is it how am I changed? Is that becomes the question from the beginning of the poem to the end of it. What have I found out either about myself or the world? Um, and that's where we lead, that's where we end it, right? And so is paradise home? Is paradise self-belonging? I don't think the use of the word paradise is perfection. I don't think it's heaven, right? But I do think it's a sort of transformation of the poet, and that we're reaching for. So I bring this poem in particular because, again, it feels sort of for me a guiding poetics. And as we get into my work, what I'm always trying to do is test the windows. Which window, which opening feels most ideal or most resonant for what I'm trying to do in this poem, right? It's a constant looking out of the different windows in the house and deciding what what tool serves the poem best. So yeah, so we can get into that. And here are some of my possibilities or my experiments. Um, let's see. Okay, so this first poem is called In Defense of Roaming, after Jaffa with a line from E.B. Shockley. Um, this is an experiment and a possibility in which I approach this poem wondering, what does it mean? How do I create a polyvocal I? And how do I hold many threads and many migration stories in the body of one poem. And this was the result of that questioning. So we can scroll down. In Defense of Roaming, as you can see, the poem is a key for the image above, but I don't think we can maybe see both at the same time. So I'll just get, oh, perfect, thank you. In Defense of Roaming, the distance between life and death is often a matter of migration. Migration, a matter of community, of who is there to hold you once the train rolls in. I took lovers in Chicago, in Brooklyn, in Philly. They came from Tennessee, Georgia, Louisiana. We were clusters from a wild bush, flailing on the wind, but still skin to skin. More than once, I've been devoured on the top bunk of a hostel bed in the unnamed country of my mind, seen escape smolder in a fugitive's eyes and grown heavy-lidded. Twice, I've heard the hydrangeas scream from their soil cells and, recognizing the plea, yanked them free. Just down the dirt road from my libido, two girls giggle and steal kisses behind a church pew. A few years up the street, I hang oiled and nude in a New York apartment, caressing the dent on a bed as if my man is still there. The artist anonymous but thorough, dark painted nipples winking above a velvet duvet. I imagine a Black movement so stuttered it eludes mapping. Bodies traceless, tied only to the other for the length of good sense. Darling, I'm in your city next. When my ship docks at 7, meet me at the port with soft hands full of wild and free flowers. I don't know where I'm going, but I need a ride. Yes. Yeah, so this is Southern United States and trying to trace familial movement, right? But of many people and holding that in one space. Was it successful? I don't know, but it's the possibility of the thing, right? That keeps you trying. And we can keep going. Thank you. Carolina Triptych. So I really resonated when Kandace was speaking about this idea of belonging and not belonging and the tensions between belonging and not belonging. And for me, again, I'm a lifelong Southerner from North Carolina, but I live in New York City. And with my own sort of migration story comes that tension, right? And so that's what this poem is sort of speaking about. It's in the Carolina Triptych in the afterlife of Hurricane Helene 2024. You may remember or may not that Hurricane Helene was a devastating storm that hit Western North Carolina last year and really devastated a lot of Western North Carolina. People are still sort of recovering. So thinking about that as well. 1, little girl, enjoy the creeks while you can. Cup the murky water teeming with mollusks, white crappies brushing past your bare feet. Thickets of loblolly pine line the valley back to the house you will leave. It is only human, baby, to want the honey without the bees' racket, summer rain with no morning slugs. Like raccoons, we get what we can take. We leave what we cannot. Up north somewhere, Morrison writes of the thin thread between cosmopolitan and lonely. On a plane that never lands, you will scratch mosquito bites to the blood. 2, and in the bark of the sweet gum in the middle of the forest, in the version of the world where you did not leave, did not can the wren's call widening cross sky like breath for wet paint on park benches, singular honey locust given its street plot. You carve a wound just to watch sap fill the gash like spit might a mouth, children a silence. The origin of the urge unclear as the tree's proclivity for hemorrhage, how it stands to gain from such amber losing. 3, when I violence, I never know what came first, destruction or the impulse to injure. I do know, oh, can we sorry. I do know a landscape changes a person like weather, a flight pattern, and I am no safer than the soil staining my soles at any moment given to floodwater. I couldn't leave this land if I left it. I am honey-scented, thick-throated sparrow, heavy with tree song. To what do you owe the most allegiance? Morrison asks in the book, on the shelf, in the room that was always my room, haunting me with its steeple ceiling. And I say, peace, say, my mother, say, the dust we will become, how it scatters itself everywhere. Thanks. Yes. Okay, and then I think I might have one more after this, I can't remember. But this poem, Mandy and Helen discuss inheritance. Again, thinking about impossibility, or possibility rather, and thinking about when Dickinson speaks of the intimacy, right? The sort of how does she the intimacy that lyric allows, right? This deep intimacy, but also this way it invites others in. Persona to me is in a manner in which I can get as close as possible to my ancestors, right? And so this is the first woman is Amanda Winston, who is my great 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 grandmother, and then the second woman is Helentine Riley, who is my grandmother. And all you need to know is Amanda, known as Mandy, was enslaved, and that my grandmother, who is very much alive and well, was a sharecropper, so also picked cotton in Mississippi. So this is Mandy and Helen discuss inheritance. There is an epigraph by Nikki Finney, which reads, the grandmothers were right about everything. And it is a contrapuntal, so I will read it the three ways. The first side is Mandy. Oh, also one thing to know, so these two women, of course, never met, but they bear a striking resemblance. And I wondered if they could have a conversation, what would they say? So here we go. I am evening dust meddled up by midnight calloused feet. Crescent smirks aslant and tight-lipped, saltwater and shores worried marriage between slats of stenciled on brow. Forehead to jaw, I am a stretch of open field and lowered eyes, squirrel meat catching in a molar's gum, 12 siblings with orbs tinged with knowing. My mother was feral, a horse caught, haltered, walked from her Georgia to this, a flatland of fractal pastures, all calling us names that are not our own. Scroll, please. Yes, can we scroll a little bit to sorry, I think to the next page. Yes. My name, that ginger gilt on scorched afro, knees made strong by the blanched days spent crouching in sun-baked soil. Daughter of my daughter's daughter, take off your woolly shirt. The sun tattoos my truth so on your spine. Mandy, stardust letters gathered like constellations, as if you conjured me, as if I birthed you myself. And the other side is Helen. Morning calls for bended work. Child curved close to earth, like in prayer. Yes, ma'am, I am offspring of coffle, drug, and lugged through river chain, frenetic groan of labor song, sweat of yanked bloom and nut's edge. I obey my father and gather what my hands can hold. Flesh and blood call me beanpole, slim. Still, I broadened moth-like in dirt at midday's break, boasted God's word to a motley flock. Like you, I vision. At 6, I watched a lamb, white and aglow, trot under Ma's bed and never come out. 2 rows over labors a boy who will heave his bones to my altar and ask for my youth. I'll say yes with your mouth, woo in service of our gold-flecked image. Mother, hear me. Let these arms be the last scabbed by sunlight. Let pasture rest. Our sacks in the midden, your hands on my wrists, busied by what pays, what loves your daughter's back. And then across. I am evening dust meddled up by morning calls for bended work, midnight calloused feet, crescent child curved close to earth like smirks aslant and tight-lipped in prayer. Yes, ma'am, I am offspring of salt water and shore's worried marriage, coffle drug and lugged through river between slats of stenciled chain, frenetic groan of labor song, sweat on brow. Forehead to jaw, I am a stretch of yanked bloom and nut's edge. I, of open field and lowered eyes, obey my father and gather squirrel meat, catching what my hands can hold. Flesh and blood in a molar's gum, 12 siblings call me beanpole, slim. Still, I broadened moth-like with orbs tinged with knowing. My mother was in dirt at midday's break, boasted God's word feral. A horse caught, haltered to a motley flock. Like you, I walked from her Georgia to this vision. At 6, I watched a lamb, a flat land of fractal pastures, all white and aglow, trot under Ma's bed, calling us names that are not our own and never come out. 2 rows over labors my name, that ginger guilt on a boy who will heave his bones to my scorched afro, knees made strong by the altar, and ask for blanched days spent crouching in my youth. I'll say yes with your sun-baked soil. Daughter of my daughter's mouth, woo in service, daughter. Take off your woolly shirt of our gold-flecked image. Mother, the sun tattoos my truth, so hear me. Let these arms be the last on your spine. Mandy, scabbed by sunlight. Let pasture rest. Stardust letters gathered our sacks in the midden. Your hands on my wrists like constellations, as if you conjured me, as if, busied by what pays, I birthed you myself. What loves your daughter's back. Thanks. And I'll probably stop there. I don't know how we're on time. So, but again, feeling very guided by Dickinson and trying all the doors and seeing what opens. So, thank you guys.
Wonderful. That was such a magical poem, the way the form worked. I think people really enjoyed that. And I just wanted to take us back to your question in case people want to respond in the chat, which was, what doors or windows, nuances, possibilities, tensions does poetry hold open that other genres do not? Is poetry, the reading or writing of it, a mechanism for homemaking for you? How? And of course, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to turn it back on you and ask you about it in terms of your poetry. I think, yeah, things that stuck out to me in that question were thinking about doors and windows, and that related to content and form. And then also that idea of homemaking was interesting to me too.
Yeah. So it might be obvious. I love forms and playing with forms, and I see choosing the right container of a poem um, as something that I'm figuring out in revision, right? It's not. I do want to get to the point where if you're ever looking at a poem, you're like, okay, this is feeling like a sonnet. This wants to be a villanelle, or this wants to be. I'm trying to sharpen that instinct, so it looks a lot like me taking language, raw material lines, and dropping it in different places and seeing in different forms, right? And seeing where it clicks, where it feels aligned, where it wants to be. And that can be really arduous, right? Like to keep trying and thinking and being wrong. And so I see that as a sense of homemaking, one for the poem, right? Where does it feel at home? But also it's deeply clarifying for me, right? To go back to Dickinson's poem, when I feel like I've been able to make a home for the poem, right? And I do approach poems sort of an emotional way. For instance, with this last poem, really wanting to feel close to these women, right? And having sort of disparate ideas of and facts and information and wanting to see how can I put them into conversation. And I read this poem and feel a sense of home and feel a sense of connection that maybe didn't exist before I created the poem, right? So I'm actively making an external place or somewhere that I can lay my own head, right? Somewhere that scratches the itches that I have about personal history, familial history, fracture. Um, and so that's why I really think we can kind of create our own, and that can happen on an emotional register. It can happen on an intellectual register, right? Like how can our poems be a place in which we scratch our own itches and feel like we belong? So those are the ways it happens for me typically in a formal way. But yeah, I hope that made sense.
I love that. I love that. And I'm thinking about something else too, because we're all editors. And something that I'm thinking about a lot and being careful about is the idea that sometimes you have poems in front of you that have, you know, forms or moments in them in terms of how it's written, where there might be a sense of discomfort or things not fitting together. And I feel like, and I don't know if you agree with me, but like as editors, it's so important to be open to that. That everything doesn't have to be neat. It doesn't have to be completely like written out in a way which seems symmetrical or all kind of like in sort of orderly fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that as well. And and going back to I maybe biased, but I think maybe poems more than any other genre is a place where those types of tensions not only can exist, but the poem is made better by those tensions, right? Like what are we doing if that messiness isn't there as well, right? Which is really exciting, editorially and as a writer, you know. Um, yeah.
Mm. Love that. But let's quickly check. Maybe Anna can help us to see what's been happening in the chat and if there are any questions or thoughts people have had.
Yeah, we have a couple really interesting responses. Diana says um, she's quoting perhaps Sylvia Plath, not sure. How can I know what I think until I see what I say? Is how I think
Perfect. Yeah.
all creative writing, but especially poetry, is at the window and door, many windows, many doors, itself saying the unsayable, finding your way as you travel through the poem, both for poet and for reader.
Gorgeous. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We also had a question. Um, Sonia was asking specifically about writing contrapuntals. If there's anything you'd like to say, Tangie, about your strategy for doing them?
A few things. One, I think contrapuntals um are descriptive heavy poems. Like so leaning on description as the narrative form will help you because you can adjectives can sort of coexist in interesting and surprising ways, you know, where the lines break and where the seams are. If you're kind of really if you're really tied to narrative moving in a certain way, you'll get stumped up with a contrapuntal. I also think it is a grammar form. Like, you know, if you can just get the grammar to match on either sides, make sure that, you know, you're not if you're ending a line with a verb, making sure the next line starts with an adjective, that sort of things, that will help the seam disappear over time. But I don't find them easy. I don't find them, I'm not like, oh wow, like, yeah, it's time to, you know, to bust out another contrapuntal. I ran from this poem in particular being a contrapuntal. I was like, maybe it can be something else, please. I don't, but it wanted to be, and so I kind of have to. But I don't find them easy. Lean on description and make sure your grammar rules are lining up, and you'll be golden. Yeah.
Really helpful. Thank you. Certainly also sounds like a place where you have to learn to be comfortable with tension. We also had one more answer. Christy says, I run to the quiet inner voice of resonance and open the window into my feelings if I am not in a noisy place.
Mm.
I love that. And then there was also like one comment that literally just came in, I think, from Kate, which says, one door of possibility for me in poetry is the genre's more expansive relationship to sense making, more room for strangeness, more enthusiasm for difficulty, and filling in the blanks in reading, which is lovely too. Love that.
I love strangeness.
Definitely, definitely. But at this point, we'd better go on, make sure that we have time for Zakia and Zakia's question. So thank you so much, Tangie. Wonderful readings, and looking forward to seeing what Zakia's going to ask us.
Okay, hello everybody. Thank you for being here, and thank you for having me to Zoe and Anna and the Emily Dickinson Museum. This is really exciting, and it's been really nice to hear Candace's reading and Tangie's reading. This is my first time hearing Tangie's work, so I am now a fan of both of them. And my question to you all, I think, kind of goes off of, I think Christy mentioned the resonances, and I wanted to ask about what the sounds of home are for you. What sounds do you associate with home, both inside the windows, because I want to carry that metaphor through, and the doors of home and outside? And I'll put that in the chat. So, sounds do you associate with home, both inside the windows and doors of home and outside? Um, And then the poem that I'm going to read from Emily Dickinson is called This World Is Not Conclusion. This world is not conclusion. A sequel stands beyond, invisible as music, but positive as sound. It beckons and it baffles. Philosophies don't know. And through a riddle, at the last, sagacity must go. To guess it puzzles scholars. To gain it, men have shown contempt of generations and crucifixions known. And so I think I chose this poem partially because of its music, and it's pointing to music. It's pointing to what's invisible and listening. And I think that's such a huge part of my practice. What are the sounds around me? What are the things that I can pick up on that aren't visible? How do I transfer that into a poem? But I also really enjoy how Emily Dickinson, and a lot of her poems, philosophizes about the world. That's like home for me, thinking about big questions, essentially, and the complexity of big questions. And I like how she doesn't answer them in simple ways or ways that you would expect. There's these twists and turns where she's kind of turning the ideas around in her mind. So I really enjoy that about her work. And in one of the preparation meetings that we had for this event, I was telling the other two writers that she's, I think, the first poet whose full collection I'd read. So she's a special poet for me, and I felt affinity for her work right away when I read it. So, my first poem that I'm going to read for you is a new poem for me, and it's called Olamina's Hyperempathy. And so, Lauren Olamina, is the protagonist of Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower. And for those who haven't read it, Lauren has this ability to feel other people's sensations, pleasurable, painful, and people who she doesn't even know. She can just pick up on these feelings. And so I wondered what it would be like to write a persona poem from Lauren Olamina's perspective. So this is that. Olamina's hyperempathy. I wonder if I could live I wonder if I could live. I wonder if I could live in a house sterile of news, sanitized of mentioning the end of days. Every piece of mercurial dust collected and accounted for. I'm on to alternative therapies, the single pitch of a tuning fork, a space where I could focus on only one thing. As the mind wanders, I draw it back and back and back. The blackness that I sink into, that I am orbiting, is not some other world. It is the world. And so we can go on to the next page. Thank you. So this next poem, the next two poems comes from my collection Into the Same Sound Twice. I don't know if you can see it, but I can put a link in the chat, published by Saren. So this one is Dust. And definitely inside that question about what are the sounds inside the home, this one is inside, but both, I guess they're both inside and outside poem. Dust. I heard out of nowhere the resonant moans of a cello. And perhaps this was in response to hitting a certain pitch of feeling, a film where a couple takes a road trip and things begin to fall apart. That's when the cello sounded. I can't think in unknown music, but the washing machine provided an ambient sound, and I was able to pick up on a signal not emitted from the neighbors. The theme music for stubborn gladness or a sweet but bitter need. A home that can't be returned to, convened in my living room, playing tenors of ache that I could not name, but had found an audience in me. I pressed my ear to the walls to see if the noise level grew. Could I be the instrument? I checked the volume on all my devices. The resonance of those low levels of longing and mourning continued to play, though I could not translate it. I am not a musician. The melody paused in time with the washing machine as if to take a breath. I thought about people who claim to record the dead and say ghosts prefer to speak over a running faucet or radio wave static, as though a sharp white background is a kind of net. Then enter French horns in a casual flutter, everything taking its time and talking at once, a movement. When the washer stopped, so did the jazz. And so this next poem, I just want to do kind of a like a little sound check because some of the sounds that I make in this poem, um, Zoom can think of it as background noise. And so I just want to make it sure that everybody can hear when I make these kind of staticky sounds. So just, yes or no in the chat. Shh. Can you guys hear that? It's kind of like a staticky S sound. Okay, good, great. So you'll be able to hear that part of the poem. I'm just gonna get a little drink of water. Okay. So this one's called The Earth Eating Fire, and it starts with the epigraph. They say that if we suppress all these fires, we end light burning, we will have great new forests. And we did. We had so much great new forest that we created a problem. Stephen Pine, fire historian. Oya's dress of smoke hangs in the air, a texture of haunting, a series of negatives, transparencies, X-rays. We see through an oak's missing heartwood, ghost of gnarled roots, upturned, exposed, releasing an ecology of spirits. The whole forest spins as if on display. Open pine cones gummed in resin, sink them into soft soil, spell of effluvium, fumigate, smoke, be the cure. Separate good fire from wild, peel back brambles layer by layer. May running waters reach our interior with the help of your embers. The fire-fearful, fear flames will jump holding lines, run, fly, shapeshift, as they sometimes do, into communities. Fear fire cannot be conned. An escaped fire, cause for alarm. Burning to distinguish good fire from wicked, see fire as funeral, as pyre, as a spreading crematorium. Anomaly of wind. Shh. Shh. In the raging wildfires, you wonder what sounds the trees made as they burned. In a flash, a spiky feeling, everything can change. Volatile as a compound that refuses stasis, steals protons and electrons from passers-by to become some other form. Joy can come with mourning. For a while, it was difficult to celebrate the hardest thing that's happened. I mourned, but the joy did not come. I think of how best to commemorate this pruning. The God who sees problems as opportunities to dance was showing me beauty, or the edge of my suffering is exquisite, a prescribed burn, or that pain is a circle with vegetation along inner and outer rings. I listened for the lyricism in the crackling, the artistry in chewing through dry matter, breaking down the fourth wall of thorns. This was no butterfly tasting my hand with its feet or stealing a drink from my sweat. This dragonfly, former nymph, which I had always thought meant fairy, clung to my hand and flew away only once I asked it to. Anti-logging protesters plant themselves in cement using an iron seed called sleeping dragon, or wedge themselves in tripod barricades made from felled trees, or nest in branches, or block roads made for lorries to protect the old groves, trees half the age of Gilgamesh. I named you each month that you remained: habitat, medicine, food, health, dense woods, canopy, respite, shade. This heat will devour undergrowth, lap tree moss, blister hazel stalks, coax brave new shoots for newborns' wicker baskets, caps, and entice acorns to fall. Heat will broil rain-guzzling invasive plants, so chilled water streams through, flames charred wake, down into watershed, and Klamath River nourishing the salmon. Soon, bare grass, huckleberries reaching for water, overrun by Scotch brook, fir trees, thickets of blackberries. Animals will travel here for a dip in ash baths, cooling, natural antiseptic. But this fire will not cure the climate. Prescription: 8 parts dead leaf, 1 part sun, 3 parts ozone-charged firmament, 6 parts still, undisturbed air. On the eve of an afternoon, in a little clearing, below an amber sun and a canopy of pines, the cultural burn begins.
Wow. I love this poem so much, Zakia, and I'm so happy that we published it in Poetry Wales first. I feel so proud of that because it is really incredible and it's wonderful to hear it read. It
Thank you
really
so
is.
much.
Yeah. And I wanted to like just reiterate your question again for people in the chat, which is all about sounds.
Mhm.
What are some of the sounds that you associate with home, both inside the windows and doors of home and outside? So I can't wait to see what people make of that. But of course, sound is hugely important for your poetics. And I wondered if you'd talk a little bit about it for us.
You know what? It's funny because it's something that I think I realized through the process of writing that sound was so important to me. I would get the feedback that, oh, my poetry is quite rhythmic, and people could pick up on the rhythm of the poetry when I was doing workshops and things like that and showing my work to other writers. But it's not something I was very much aware of until, hearing it. It's just, I guess it's so internalized for me. The importance of sound, or even thinking about language having sound and having rhythm. I think that's just so embedded into my idea of language that I didn't really realize that that's maybe something a bit different about me than, or even I have a different interpretation of sound than other poets. So I think that it's just so ingrained. And then growing up, I took dance classes. And, in high school, I took West African dance classes. And so there's the polyrhythmic sounds were something that, I grew up hearing the drummers and that polyrhythm. And so I think for me, um, language itself, even hearing different people speak in the patterns of speech, make me think of home. I also went to like a Spanish immersion school, so in elementary school. So there's that different rhythm and cadence of the Spanish language as well. Um, that, sounds like home for me. Water, the sound of water, Land of 10,000 Lakes is where I'm from. So, hearing water, hearing splashing and things like that. So, yeah, those are some of the sounds, both inside the home and outside the home. But I also think of home in like the wider context of not just inside the house. I think of home as like very relationship oriented, like between people, among community, but also in the environment. I definitely think of like natural landmarks when I think of where I'm from.
Mm, I love that. And I was also thinking about in terms of your place in like literary communities, you're an American writer living in the UK. And I just wonder what that's been like for you, whether you feel like, you've got lots of links in the UK now with different magazines, you've had a lot of different fellowships and experiences. But like, how do you still feel connected to the American literary community? And I wonder how that all works for you.
That's a good question. I feel that I have been so warmly welcomed by whenever I meet people from the American literary community. I feel so warmly welcomed by them, and I have some really good relationships from people that I have met even just online. Sometimes I've met like, for example, Era D. Matthews. I met her online just because we knew somebody in common. And so we actually met in person many years after we had developed this relationship online. And it felt just as, it felt like we had, known each other in person all of these years. So I just have felt really warmly welcomed, really brought into communities there. I did Bread Loaf over in June, the environmental Bread Loaf, and that was mostly American writers were there, and I've just, again felt very warmly welcomed, and still keep in touch with my Bread Loaf cohort from that. So that has been great. And then also, of course, I have a lot of connections in the United Kingdom. Um, and I credit, the people who mentored me informally here with me becoming, the writer that I am today. People like Malika Booker and Roger Robinson, still kind of offer me guidance and support, as I reach different milestones. So I feel like I'm quite lucky. I feel like I have to shout out the African American writing community in the US, period, because I just feel like it's just so warm. I've had nothing but good experiences.
That's wonderful to hear. And interesting, that sort of sense of being in two places or like
Mm,
places is interesting. But maybe we should go to Anna now and see what interesting comments we've had about sound and home in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Diana says home is a cat's chirp at the window, a seagull flying by.
Wow.
And then so many call outs for beautiful lines in your poems. Yeah.
yeah.
I'm just taking a moment to look through myself.
Yeah, I'm heading
Mhm,
down. Home is waking to the sound of the key in the lock, the door opening, my love walking in when tomorrow leaks wind around the curtains. Oh, wind, when tomorrow leaks wind around the curtains.
mhm,
Mm,
I live next to a highway, so the constant hum of cars rushing by is something I hear every day.
mhm,
When
mm,
it is very quiet, I can hear a train near my home and it makes me pause and breathe, almost like a meditation.
mhm.
There's so many good ones in here.
Yeah.
Sound of home, my mother's voice on the phone saying, "Hi, love," which I have not heard for more than 23 years.
wow.
Mm. The sounds of home before and home now, and tea kettle sings in grandmother's kitchen on Christmas Day.
Mm.
Mm,
I love this because you all aren't going for like the obvious sounds of home. I love how you're really, thoughtful about these questions.
mm. And I like how some of these are sounds that don't exist anymore, maybe. That's so
Mm,
poignant, like how
yeah.
remembered sounds, and
Hmm.
you still, they still might come back to you at certain points in your life.
Mm,
Want to hear a few more?
Yeah, I'd love to.
hmm.
Inside sounds, the steel on steel whack of the coffee filter on the compost bowl, the pad of silent cat feet. Outside, June bugs at night, the kid with the speaker tied to his bike doing tricks and play what he likes. The wind in the cottonwood. A cacophony of crickets sing in the Connecticut woods, though I haven't visited for years. Their generations live without me in the humid night.
Mm.
Incredible.
Yeah, we could make a kind of library of lost sounds, couldn't we?
Yeah.
It'd be great. And I see the desert wind tickles wind chimes on the porch of my childhood as well. It's very gorgeous.
Mm,
All very beautiful. And I just love this idea of thinking about home through sounds. I think is really wonderful. And it suits you so well, Zakia, as well. I love it. So, we're coming to the end of our session, and I want to thank our poets for their absolutely stunning work. I knew it was going to be good, but I feel like I've been completely floored by the poems read today. It's just wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Um, I have a couple of little housekeeping things that I want to mention, but before I do, I wondered if you could each let me know if there's one thing you'd like us to go away with from like the poems today and thinking about home and resilience. And maybe we'll just go around like in the order that you read. So I'll start off maybe with Candace. Is there something you'd like us to go away with from the poems and the Dickinson poem you read, what we discussed and talked about?
Um, I think if anything in particular, I guess it would be this idea of making home where you are, um, as being as valuable as finding home, that sometimes you don't have to travel anywhere or go anywhere.
I love that. That's a beautiful thought. And something that we'll hold close to us when we go away from the session today, for sure. How about Tangie?
Yeah, kind of related, and I'm thinking, of course, about Dickinson's understanding of home, which makes me think about a Baldwin quote, um, where he says, "The place in which I fit does not exist until I create it." And I think that's something Dickinson believed, and lived in a similar way. And so that is what I would say to take away from kind of really committing ourselves to creating the space that we feel most at home in, both creatively and in just our living. Yeah.
Mm. I love that idea. It feels full of agency to me, which I love. So I'm definitely going to take that away with me from the session. I love that. And Zakia.
I think I'm gonna say the one of the takeaways. I love this idea of the window, into home and sitting close, to the window or opening it up. I like this idea that there's various proximities you can get to home, and thinking about it in that way. So how close do you want to be to home? Do you want to open the window up? Do you want to climb through the window? You know, it's up to you. So.
Yeah, and that's so Dickinson, isn't it? I mean, it's come up here for all of us in a way, hasn't it? The
Mhm.
windows and doors, and has kind of held together the session. So I love that we're finishing off with that as well. Thank you. So, like, as we close, though, I wanted to just come back to the mission of Poetry Wales, that since 1965, the magazine has sought to be a home for international poetry in Wales, a space where voices from Wales and around the world can be in dialogue. And that mission continues today. It has a really strong commitment to nurturing new poets and new editors alike. Our next call for submissions will be in November, and we warmly invite you to share your work with us. We also have a new issue coming out in November featuring Welsh and Zimbabwean poetry, which I'm really excited about. If you'd like to know more about our story, you can watch a short film celebrating our 60th anniversary. Just go to tinyurl.com/Poetry Wales film. I'll put that in the chat. And thanks for joining us and for being a part of this continuing conversation about poetry, home, and resilience. I think we really need it at the moment. And I really needed this today. I don't know about you, but this has been really helpful, complex, but uplifting too. And I want to thank the poets again. They're wonderful poets and they're wonderful editors. And I'm so glad to have been able to introduce you to them if you didn't know them already today. So, with that, I'll pass over to Anna, who has a couple more things to say about the festival.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Zoe. Thank you, Candace, Zakia, and Tangie. Really awed by all of your poems and your beautiful readings. This was such a wonderful way to close our festival. We do have one more program coming up. So if you would like to tune in to hear the last poems read for the Poetry Marathon, which is our grand finale, you can tune in about an hour, 12:30. That'll begin. I especially love the end of the marathon, getting to see Dickinson's final short, sweet poems near the end of her life. They're really beautiful. And thank you all for joining us at home. And if you would like to make a donation, you can do that on the museum's website to support programs like this. We really appreciate it. That's www.emilydickinsonmuseum.org. That's also where you can find more information about the festival. And I hope you will go on the event page for this program and look up each of these poets so that you can continue to read their work. Thank you all so much and hope to see you again soon.
Thanks for having us, Anna. We really appreciate it.